So, I bought my first rental property when I was just 17 years old, and this is how I did it. It was definitely no easy feat, and it took lots of time and dedication and effort. But in this video, I'm going to show you the biggest ways I was able to afford a rental property at just 17 years old. And I'm going to break down the numbers for you guys and some very helpful tips that helped me buying a property at such a young age. So hopefully you guys can do this one day or very soon. So hopefully you guys like it. And first, I just wanted to give you a quick backstory kind of on myself and how I was able to get to this point. I grew up in a very average middle-class family, and both my parents worked 9-to-5 jobs. And those 9-to-5 jobs were lucky enough to provide us with a very comfortable life, and they were able to send me to university, and we were able to go on vacations all the time and travel and live in a decent house. But the thing I started to notice as I got older was that my parents were more and more tied down to their jobs. They couldn't just walk away. They couldn't just go travel whenever they wanted. And if they stopped working, they would stop having an income. I started doing research, and I had to figure out, how am I going to make money without working and from anywhere? So I'm able to travel, I'm able to do whatever I want when I want, and not have to be tied down to a 9-to-5 job. And quite frankly, I understand this sounds like quite an entitled way of thinking, but believe me when I say my parents weren't there to give me any handouts or to just give me that life that I was dreaming of as a young kid. I started looking into drop shipping, affiliate marketing, and all these different kinds of online businesses. But after researching further, I kind of decided for myself that this necessarily isn't going to be long-term, and it's kind of gimmicky almost, as it's online and it's not an actual physical business. I know this is a very old-fashioned way of thinking compared to a lot of internet entrepreneurs these days. And it is true, you can make a lot of money with drop shipping or affiliate marketing. But I wanted something that was going to be very safe and very long-term, so I knew I would be set up for the future. And that's when I came across the most famous real estate entrepreneurs and YouTubers like Graham Stephan, Grant Cardone, and I started watching all of their content and teaching myself everything I could learn. I started reading books around 15, 16, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and 4-Hour Work Week to learn as much as I could about real estate investing and real estate in general, and I watched as many videos as I possibly could on it. The first thing I learned from all these things was that in order to buy a house, you had to come up with a down payment. Average, a down payment is usually 20% of the purchase price, and that's like the initial money that you put down on buying a home. And I bought my first apartment for $140,000. So that means I would need to come up with $28,000 for the down payment on my apartment. So for about 3 years straight, I worked as hard as I could to save up as much money as I possibly could in the shortest period of time. I started flipping things, going to garage sales, buying things and selling them for more on eBay. All the money I got for birthdays, Christmases, I saved. And I worked as many jobs as I could. I worked as a grocery store clerk, and I worked walking dogs. I also worked as a guest services representative at a local ski resort. And I was working multiple jobs at the same time, just trying to bank as much money as I could. And after about 3 years of religiously saving every dollar, I had saved up $28,000 total for the down payment, and I could now start looking into buying a house. And now do mind you, it's not usually $28,000. It's not usually always going to be 20%. Sometimes it's less. You can get what's called a first-time home buyer's loan, and you only need 5% down. Average around 20%. So then after having that down payment, I had to figure out how I was going to get a loan from the bank at just 17 years old. And so unfortunately for me, I realized that the bank doesn't give out loans here in Canada to 17-year-olds if you're buying a home or really for anything in that matter. I had no credit score, and I didn't have much of a great source or proof of income. And of course I was under the legal age, so I was still a child. So there was not much I could do to get a loan from the bank. So I had to turn to the only place that could make this work, and that was my parents. After a lot of convincing and negotiating with my parents, they had seen how hard I'd actually been working on this, and they decided to take a chance on me. So they let me actually use their name for the mortgage. So they applied for the mortgage and got the loan, and I funded the deal, and I still did the deal. So they didn't give me any money and they didn't do the deal, but I just put the house in their name because I was too young, and it will be put into my name once I turn 18. Side note, I am 18 and it is in my name now. This was last year. So the next biggest thing I would have to do is to look for a property that was going to make me money and that was going to be a good investment. The mortgage on the property and the expenses on the property had to be less than what I was getting for rent. That way I would have a profit margin. So say my expenses are $500 a month and I'm getting paid $1,500 by my tenant, I'd be making $1,000 a month passively and just from my apartment. Once I found an apartment I liked, I had to start running the numbers. And that means looking at your expenses and the money that's coming in. So for me, my mortgage is about $300 a month. Because it's an apartment building, I have what's called strata fees, which are another $150 to $200. And then on top of that, I have to pay taxes, and I also have to have some money set aside in case something breaks or goes wrong. So all in all, my expenses come to around $500 per month. Really important to get a good, reliable tenant because that's who's gonna be paying you every month. So they gotta have a good job and you gotta check their references and make sure they're a good person that you can trust to live in your property and to make sure that they're actually gonna pay you every single month. So I had to find a tenant who was gonna pay more than $500 a month for me to make a profit and for me to make money on this investment. And that means I'd be cash flowing about $1,000 every single month from my property without having to work or without having to show up to a job or go to a 9-to-5 I didn't want to go to. On top of this, the price of real estate usually goes up and appreciates. Very rarely, unless you're in a recession or economic downturn of some kind, does real estate go down. And since last year, when I bought the property for $140,000, I just got it reappraised this year at $185,000. On top of that, I also have my renter paying me every single month, and I'm currently making around $1,000 profit monthly from the rent that I receive. So that means I made around $40,000 in profit in 1 year just by holding on to that real estate and having my money in the property. My goal is to keep building the real estate portfolio, and eventually, if you had 5 or 10 properties that were making you $1,000 a month, that's $10,000 a month, and that's around the same amount of money you're making working at a job. And then you can use that money to basically live however you want to live, whether that be traveling full time or just doing nothing all day. For me personally, I'm going to hopefully be traveling a lot more full time because that's truly my passion. And I hope to get there by investing more and more in real estate and just having that passive income coming in every single month. And by accomplishing these goals, I'm just that much closer to not having to work a job or a 9-to-5. But for today, that's all I have to say on the subject. There's definitely a lot more I could get into on this. Let me know if you would like to see more videos on real estate investing at a young age.